seat, please. Thank you. It's great to see so many of you here tonight. In 1984, I was a sophomore in college here at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. And during the course of that academic year, I went to New York City to visit a friend of mine who was in the seminary, studying for the Diocese of Lincoln, Tom Fushinaro, who was my good friend then and is still my good friend now. And I remember we were walking through the streets of New York, and he was telling me very excitedly about the new Archbishop of New York, John Cardinal O'Connor. And one of the first things he did when he became the Cardinal Archbishop was he made this announcement to for any woman who was pondering an abortion or didn't think that she could handle taking care of a child, the Archdiocese of New York would be glad to help her in any way she needed, and they would be glad to take care of her baby and take her baby if she wanted them to make sure that baby had a good home. And it was a really powerful statement at the time because nobody else was saying anything like that. And he would go on during the time that he was the Cardinal Archbishop of New York to be a champion on life issues, pro-life issues, serving the poor, in so many ways. And he doing it all with grace and holding to the Church's teachings. And one of the things that he did, which was really beautiful, is he decided he wanted to found a religious community that would be dedicated to witnessing the dignity of human life, the Sisters of Life. I remember watching him on EWTN when he announced that he was going to do this. It was really cool. It was just amazing. It's like this new life was coming into the church because he was really not just a spokesman for the church in New York, he was a spokesman for the church in America. And he understood that, and he was a hero. He was a champion to us in the way he led the Archdiocese of New York and the way he spoke as a prelate for the United States, this country. And so he founded this beautiful community of the Sisters of Life, and they're wonderful. We've had the sisters here before, not these sisters, but other sisters. Sister Mary Gabriel and others have been here on trips before, but it's been a while. And so I'm really glad to welcome the sisters here tonight. It's great to have you here. And Sister Bethany Madonna is here, and she's going to speak. And some of you have heard her speak at SEEK or at SLS, and she speaks about it every year and says she's a really good storyteller. And so let's give a really great Husker welcome to Sister Bethany Madonna.
Can you hear me okay with this? Oh my glory. This feels like a pilgrimage of gratitude. Also, you might know that Marie Wathen entered our community just this last September. So, we actually weren't invited here. We invited ourselves. And I think I emailed every Focus missionary that is online and got connected with Victoria and said, hey, what are y'all doing on these days? I'd love to just fold in and hang out with you. Know what you're doing. You want to have dinner or like that. So anyway, it is a great joy, and we're so grateful to be able to see this star, this place that God has made, where you're a communion of hearts and a family, and really nurturing new life in the church right here on a secular campus where you have a ginormous Catholic church the size of a city block. I mean, the bells ringing and adoration happening. So I'm overjoyed to be here with you and to be talking about the saints and the life of prayer and growing holiness. I thought I'd start by just sharing a story of two of my sisters who were out on a lovely bike ride on a summer day. And I'm going to withhold their names just to protect the innocent and the embarrassed. And what happened was one of the sisters, she was going at an incredible speed, and the other sister was behind and saw her hit a bump. And the bike, it kind of threw her, kind of like a rodeo bronco, into the air, and she took air chair for a time until she landed into a perfectly manicured, prize-winning rose bush in front of a house that looked like something out of Better Homes and Gardens. So the sister behind, her first thought was obviously for the welfare of her sister. But the second thought, and it might have been concurrent, was that this might be the last straw for the owner of the house, and he might leave the church. Just the devastation. It was just bad. And so the owner of the bush opened the front door and began screaming, and the sisters both braced themselves, and she's like, "You are an angel sent by God. You're an angel sent by God." And she like goes and picks Sister out. Now, Sister's rosary is like entangled into like the branches, and she's covered in scratches, and that bush to this day bears an indent of that happening. Picks her up crying, takes her inside to clean up all the scratches, and she turns out she was in the middle of a very messy and painful divorce, and she'd been away from the faith and was not practicing, but that day she had prayed her first sincere prayer in years, and she said, "God, if you can hear me and you're with me, I need a sign." Just moments before Sister came hurtling. This is no secret, but Jesus knows exactly where you are, and he knows who you are, and he knows your heart, he knows your desires, he knows your fears, he knows your history, he knows your future, and he can hear you. And he longs to hear your voice, he longs to speak to you, he wants you to know his, and he's going to guide you. So I thought we could just entrust this night to Our Lady. We celebrated the Annunciation on Monday, but this is someone who heard the voice of God and said yes, and changed everything, and gave us Jesus. So just for our own hearts to be open, that we could say yes and bring Jesus and change everything. You know, Amen. Blessed Mother, we turn to you and entrust ourselves to you. Ask for a special share in your heart. We receive and thank you for your motherhood, your tenderness towards us. Please help us to echo your yes. Please grant us great receptivity and docility and clarity. We ask all these things through your intercession and in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen. Amen. So tonight we're going to talk about holiness, and one of the best definitions of being a saint and being holy I learned from a kindergartner in a Kansas classroom of a little Catholic school. And we were privileged to be able to talk to them, and we asked them, what's the difference between New York and Kansas? And one child, a little girl, raised her hand. She goes, "Oh, it's safe here." Yeah, that's right. And then we started telling them how beautiful they were, how much God loved them, and how he had a plan for their life. And one little boy raised his hand and he goes, "I know what it is." And he was like, "Okay. What is your name?" And he was like, "Simeon." A prophet, okay? And I was like, "Simeon, what is God's plan for our lives?" And he goes, "We have to get more and more love inside our hearts and give it to other people so we can fight the devil." So I was like, "Now, Lord, let your servant go." So for this child, that's exactly the plan. We gotta get more love inside our hearts. We gotta give it to other people because we gotta fight the devil. It's true, but the victory has been won. And so, sanctity, being holy. Holy comes from an Old English word for wholeness, and this is what we long for. And this is what we desire, and this is what we want to permit God to allow in us to be whole. And there can be some hesitations when we think about sanctity and becoming holy, so we know it'll make demands on us, and it can seem sad, or it can seem like a sour pill to swallow to feel better later, or maybe boring even, a loss of some sort. But sanctity is living fully alive. It's joy, and it's joy now. It's a joy that stems from a divine love that is real, and experienced and received. We don't seek holiness for its own sake or for appearances. We want Jesus, whatever that looks like and however that manifests itself. And I love the saints. I love listening to them. I love hearing their stories. I love their prayers, what they're writing, their lives. But saints weren't, practicing their holy card poses. There were no like holy card selfies or something. Like that was really good. That's a great angle. No. They had their eyes fixed on Jesus. Jesus, whom they fell in love with. Jesus, the Word of the Father. Jesus is the Word of the Father, spoken to us, sent by the Father to tell us what the Father thinks about us, who we are, what we long for most, or what our destiny is. And they fell in love with him and his humility, his infancy, his innocence as a boy. And they fell in love with his hard work and his teaching and his healing and his preaching. And they fell in love with his suffering heart, his thirst on the cross. They fell in love. And they were wounded by this beauty, this trust in the Father. They spent hours and hours receiving from him, letting him radiate over them in prayer. Each saint finds in Jesus the answer to life's questions, the friend of their hearts, and they follow him according to their unique personality. This includes all the quirks and the rough edges, the gifts, the shortcomings, and they follow him in the location and with the people he chooses and he sets out. And I love this. I love watching that they know that he's the one who satisfies their desires. He's the one who's going to fulfill. And you're like me. We're not satisfied by the things of this world. Even the best things do not satiate our desires. We always want more. We're hoping for more. We're expecting more. More is always around the corner. I'm always seeking the more. And this is especially when it comes to love, I think. We just love to be loved. It's so good. We want that. And it's totally natural. Maybe the image and likeness of God. He's a community person. It's love. So it's extant in our being. But I remember experiencing this, when you're single, and you're getting ready to go out. And ladies, I don't know if this is your experience, but sometimes it just takes hours. Hours. I mean, just to get the outfit to match the makeup, and then the hair's a whole other story. The hair, it's gotta cooperate, and sometimes where it refuses, and then you're like, that's it. I'm gonna re-shower. I'm gonna get a blank canvas here, okay? I'm gonna start fresh. So everyone's on my page, okay? And guys, you've got to get your hair going in the right direction, the right spritz, scent, choice, that's got to be right, I'm sure. And it's like, why? Even though I know everyone who's going to be there, typically, or I know the crowd, there's this little, spark of hope, that maybe somebody new will be there. Someone unexpected. Someone who corresponds to all of my desires for love and romance. And on one side of the room, laughing. And this person will see me laughing and be totally taken by it. And then our eyes would lock and it'd be music, Guys, I think you know what I'm talking about. Now, these desires are infinite. They are infinite. And we can never put them on a finite person to fulfill. It will crush them. It will kill them. They will die. And their obituary will say something along the lines of, cause of death, that woman's mad, crazy, infinite need for love. I was crumbled under the weight of it. And so recognizing that only one can fill that need. And you talk to anyone in any vocation and they know that. Every married couple will tell you that. Only one can fill those needs. And God loves every soul that he creates, and he communicates himself specifically to you in a way that you can understand, in a way that you can receive with words that he knows you'll want to hear, a scripture passage that he knows you're thinking about, a song that he knows thrills your heart, he knows it, and he wants to speak to you, because no one can love as you can love. Fingerprints are one of my favorite things in the world, and I just love thinking about this, that out of the millions and billions of people who ever existed on the face of this earth since the beginning of time, no two have had the same set of fingerprints. Now, if God is going to take so much time to arrange and design the invisible circle pattern on the end of my finger to be totally unique to me, how much more time did he take in the love of our hearts? It's yours. No one can love like you. No one can replace you. No one can be your sub. No one loves like you love. No one can receive the love into your heart as you can. And God wants to pour his love into you as only you receive his love. No one can take your place. He needs you, he loves you, he wants you, he chose you. He desires for you to experience this communion of hearts with him. Now the saints, my favorite part of any saint's story, I love glimpses of their humanity. Love it. I want to hear anecdotes from their childhood, interactions with siblings, what kind of food they ate, that they enjoyed life, music, nature, friends, fell in love, worked hard. And even more than that, I revel in hearing about their shortcomings. I just love the character flaws, sinfulness, these sorts of things. It just helps me to relate to their experience and my experience. Is it terrible to say it out loud? No. Their weakness brings them close to me. And it gives me really a lot of hope to hear about saints, BC, before conversion. Hot tempers, melancholy, self-assertion, vanity. This one was so painfully sensitive, and that one was sort of too attached. How impulsive or stubborn or willful. Again, it comforts me in a certain sense and inspires me in another. I'm awed at how they overcome weakness with grace, or how they learn to accept it with humility. How God goes so far as to channel these energies for his own purposes, so converting animosity into a holy zeal, hypersensitivity for myself into a compassion for others, swallowing up intellectual pride and inspiring those who possess it to preach the gospel and spread the word. I love the details about the moment when they knew that Jesus was real, that he was alive, that he knew them and loved them. These men and women stopped pretending that they were in control, and they willingly accepted their dependence. They entered into a radical, childlike posture of receptivity. They expected everything from God, and thus they gained everything, because they knew he was the one who could provide a good father. So, the secrets of the saints. The first one is Elizabeth of the Trinity, and she tells us the secret that God dwells within us. Saint Elizabeth of the Trinity was called the saint of one thought because she understood our baptism. And baptism is the entryway of God into the soul and the life of grace. If we really believe what we know to be true about baptism, that you actually become a child of God, that there's an indelible seal, that God comes and dwells inside your soul, never to leave, nor to depart. St. John said, see what love the Father has bestowed on us in calling us his children. Yet this is what we are. Baptism opens up a whole world. And I kind of had an experience of this just as a sister of life. Our missions really open up the gift, not only watching the women that we serve often receive the sacraments for the first time, but I was once at our convent in Manhattan missioned where we invite pregnant women to live with us for their pregnancy, and then about 6 to 8 months after the baby's born. So you get to go on doctor's appointments with them, grocery shopping, late nights. It's a wonderful house to live in. But one of my favorite things was to go to their sonogram appointments, especially when it was their first, or the reveal sonogram appointment. And so I remember being in the room, and it's interesting, you walk in with this woman who she seems to be alone and by herself and single, and you walk into the room, it's a dark room, and you sit down, and a machine is put upon her, and suddenly pop, a little person. A little person. And it's like, whoa. And it's a new person. We don't know this person, but it's a new person on the scene. And then they put this other little machine up, and you get to hear the heartbeat. And it's like, and it like fills the whole room. You're like, I'm enveloped in the heartbeat. It's a little person. That's amazing. And then they take it off, and you walk out the room, and no one knows. No one has any idea, any clue of this little person. And I was like, wouldn't it be amazing if after baptism we had a sonogram for the soul? You're like so aware of the life of God, and it's like, you know, and like everyone's like, wow, you know, you're a tabernacle. You're a tabernacle of the Most High God. He dwells within you. So the Trinity once said, I have found heaven on earth because heaven is God and God is in my soul. I mean, living like that, it's amazing. Let me tell you about this woman. This is a picture of her. She was an angry child. No, as a child, she was known for her violent temper tantrums. She had a very strong will, and she had to be hauled out of Mass at the age of 2, screaming when she realized that her mother had loaned her favorite baby doll to the priest for the Christmas crush. She was like, Jeanette! My Jeanette! And then the violence, and then the removal. Her father died when she was very young, leaving her mother a widow, and she had a little sister. As a teen, she excelled in the piano. She was great with children. They loved her, very easy. She worked really hard to conquer her pride, one of her greatest downfalls, and she would force herself to bite her tongue with her temper. She felt called to enter the Carmelites, and her mom struggled tremendously with that decision, and insisted, rather, that they would take all their vacations at military balls and headquarters so that she would be able to meet men all the time, and wanted her to meet someone and change her mind. And so, being obedient, she went. But having given her heart to Jesus, no one would dance with her, quite frankly. And the men would even say of her when asked, just look at her. She's not for us. She carried herself like a woman taken, and she was. She loved her mother and her sister intensely, and eventually her mom gave her permission to enter Carmel. Oops. Very calm. Technology. So there she is, having entered Carmel. The beautiful thing about this is that in the midst of so much anxiety and depression, when loneliness is such a like biting experience in our culture, like the secret she tells us that I am never alone, that God is always with me, that He's aware of me, and I want to be aware of Him. Like, this is the antidote to begin really living this truth. What if I really lived that? What if I really believe what I know to be true? God is within you, and you are never alone. The second saint is Blessed Miguel Pro, and he is a Mexican martyr. I love him. If I ever get sick and need a miracle, I want him to go from blessed to saint. I want him to be the one I'll choose. And his secret is that God wants us to love with His love, even in the midst of persecution, suffering, trial, and tragedy. So when I was in college, I remember reading a book to my youngest cousin, Julia, who was 6 at the time. And I don't know what the book was called, but it could have been something like Virgin Martyrs Who Died the Most Horrific Deaths Imaginable. It was really, and it's a cartoon, but it was, St. Agnes, and you're like, wow. And then Joan of Arc, you're like, ooh. And then Maria Goretti, you're like, okay, so what happened with her was, and then Julia just decisively closed the book at one point, and she just declares, I don't want to be a saint. And I was like, oh, Julia, what makes you say that? As if I'm crazy. She goes, I think it keep us from the freedom and joy intended us in being saints. Giving God permission in our lives. We can fear that following God will hurt my social life, hurt my love life, my family life, my precious plans. Yeah, it can be helpful, right, to name fears. Fears often reveal to us places in our attachments, places where trust has not entered in, places of strongholds, It's good to name my fears. By shedding light on darkness, it can be dispersed and revealed for what it truly is. Because we can question God's providence, right? We can question his fatherhood, his goodness. Eve did that in the garden. This is the oldest echo through history, where the evil one's like, oh, did the father tell you that? It's mostly because he's not good, and he doesn't want good things for you because he withholds from you, but that's why you have to take everything for yourself. And it was in that moment, that lie, that trust died in our hearts. Trust died in our hearts. And that's what Jesus did in coming to us to restore us. Restore our trust in a good Father who didn't withhold anything, not even his own Son, not himself. So we can love with a love that isn't ours, the love that's God's, that goes beyond our fears. And what are some of the fears that really drive us, especially in our discernments in college? We can fear that God's will for us is somehow opposed to what I want, as if God doesn't know any better. And we don't always know the end of our own desires. We don't always know how they'll be fulfilled, and often we can't imagine how God is going to realize these. But he can surprise us, He knows our desires better than we do. He gave them to us. He knows how they'll be fulfilled. There are many saints who were surprised by God's plan for their life. There were saints who thought they would get married and then were called to lay consecration, like Pier Giorgio Frassati. There were saints who wanted to enter religious life and were called to marriage, like Saints Louis and Zélie Martin. Saint Therese of Lisieux's parents, her dad, Louis, tried to enter a monastery and he couldn't get the Latin down. They were like, see ya, not going to work here. And her mom tried to enter the Visitation Cloistered Convent, and they were like, you don't have a vocation here. She's like, oh, and then Louis like, oh, and then they're like, hey. And then the Lord makes a family of saints and raises up a married couple canonized together. How powerful is that? How beautiful is that? And a holy vocation that gave us Therese. Saints who wanted to live in seclusion, but were called to proclaim the gospel from the rooftops. During his time in seminary, Karol Wojtyła was the only seminarian who repeatedly was turned down every time he made the request to enter Carmel. And when he became Pope John Paul II, nobody questioned why the bishop let all the other seminarians enter Carmel and not Karol. There were saints who wanted to be foreign missionaries, and they were called to stay in their native place. I love Philip Neri. St. Francis Xavier wrote a public letter from India, and it was basically like, help! I'm dying out here. They don't let me eat or sleep. They keep making me teach them more prayers. I baptized 300,000 people. I need help. Anybody, somebody, do something. And Philip Neri read this letter, and he took it to his spiritual director. He's like, I think I need to help Francis Xavier in India. I think that's what I'm called to. And his spiritual director looked at him and he said, Philip, make Rome your Indies. And Philip Neri evangelized Rome at a time of great corruption and laxity. And he built up young adult communities, and he built up the children of the area, and he used art and all kinds of creativity. He was a prankster and loved to draw people's hearts. So yeah, we have to grow in trust, right? That God provides, even if things aren't turning out as we perceived or even desired, that he's at work, and it might be mysterious. In the face of fear, temptation, tragedy, and sin, it's so easy to wonder, where is God and what is he thinking? And why doesn't he prevent this? The saints realize that they've been invited into something. And Miguel Pro is an example of that. He was born and raised in Mexico. That's a picture of him with his family in his older years. And he was very lovable. He was a mimic. He could throw his voice, and he used this to torture his sister. He played the guitar. He was incredibly comical. When he was in his teenage years, he was dating a Protestant young woman, and she broke up with him over his devotion to Our Lady of Guadalupe. He wrote a letter to his mom mentioning the Virgin of Guadalupe and how much he loved her, and a letter to his girlfriend, and he accidentally put them in the wrong envelopes. And he received his mother's letter. And she broke it off with him, but I feel like Our Lady broke it off with her. But she loves her, obviously. But if that's the reason why she held it against Miguel Pro, his devotion to Our Lady, it was very, very clear that he chose her and he was her son. He went on a retreat when he was 18 after kind of falling away from the practice of his faith, and it was kind of spurred on by his sister's entrance to religious life. It really shook him up, feeling that loss. And he went on this retreat and had a major encounter with the Lord, and he felt called to enter the Jesuits. And so he did. He went through the formation with the Jesuits. And after his ordination, they sent him back to Mexico, which was going through a time of intense persecution where anyone in religious garb could be shot on the spot. They really wanted to eradicate the practice of Catholicism. And the government really wanted to take over. So all of his gifts really served him as a priest in persecution. For example, he would dress in costume. Far right, he would dress as a car mechanic and walk into the car mechanic place and give a retreat to the men that were there. He would, in the middle, he would dress as a wealthy businessman, stuff his clothes, make them a little heavier, and go begging. He single-handedly fundraised for 100 families financially during this time of persecution. And I don't know, it's like a Rico Suave picture, but he would be like a beggar. And he would go to the house and knock on the door as a homeless man and enter it and perform a wedding or baptism. So his nickname was called, he was the sweetbread because he brings the sweetbread where he goes. And so he lived as a priest in persecuted times. And they did finally trap him. And during that time, I mentioned his devotion to the Blessed Mother. He wrote a prayer to her 10 days before his martyrdom that asked her if he could join her beneath the cross. And they captured him, and they decided, the government, that they wanted to make his martyrdom, it wasn't to them the martyrdom, his execution very public. They wanted to scare the people. And so they decided to photograph it and film it so that it could be publicized broadly across the country. And so before that happened, he was brought to, this is the picture that the jail took of him with the tie on, and then the picture to the right is the one of him before his execution. He knelt and said, "I forgive my enemies with all my heart." And so all the executioners are lined up as a firing squad, and this is real. This is a real picture of the moment. He extended his hands out and he yelled, "Viva Cristo Rey!" which is "Long live Christ the King." And then they shot him. And the picture, the film footage went viral. And it had the exact opposite effect that the government had intended of terrifying people, because, as you know, the blood of martyrs is the seed of the Christian faith. So it was like people were like, "Raw!" It was like, nobody does that to one of our priests. And so there was a huge reaction on behalf of the people and the practice of their faith and the zeal with which they practiced it. So Miguel Pro teaches us that, you can love with a love that goes beyond you. I love him because instead of doubting God's presence or blaming or accusing God, which we can do, we just turn on God when something seems to go awry, and blame and accuse him for sorrows, injustices, whatever. Saints did not do this. When they saw corruption, when they saw violence, scandal, negligence, crying needs, saints knew that their hearts were being burdened with his burden, which is sweet and light because it's shared with him. They knew that God was calling them to participate in the alleviation of these sufferings, educating the ignorant, resisting evil with love and mercy, with a divine love beyond their human strength. They knew, whatever you do for the least of my brethren, you do for me. They knew it was Christ who was naked, sick, in prison, hungry, thirsty, homeless, abandoned, and they took him in and fed him, clothed him, visited him, and comforted him. So thank you, Blessed Miguel Pro, for teaching us about this way of love. The next saint is Blessed Charles de Foucauld, and he teaches us the secret that God makes all things new. God makes all things new. Now, we've all made choices in our lives that we regret. We're all sinners. Sin always whispers a false promise to us, and then after the fact, once we've caved, makes us doubt the possibility of God's complete love for us. The women that we walk with in our Hope and Healing mission for those suffering after abortion, they describe their experience as a sense of loss, grief, anger, confusion. They know that that event inflicted a new and a deep wound, and all too often these women and men are left to suffer alone and in silence, thinking that they're crazy for feeling the way that they do, but they're not crazy. And Jesus doesn't want any of us to be alone. Jesus is very adamant about why he came, and he came for sinners. He did not come for the righteous, he came for us, for sinners. He came to heal the brokenhearted, to bring release to prisoners. He wanted the lame to walk, the blind to see, and the dead to come back to life. So mercy is real. Mercy is possible. There is no one beyond the mercy of Jesus. One of the women that we served in our Hope and Healing mission for those suffering after abortion, she shares her story very openly that she was up very late one night and was actually in such despair. She was thinking about taking her own life, but she was flipping through channels and came to a station that had like a little fish at the bottom. And you know, one of those really cheesy Christian stations that's usually under budget. And a woman was on sharing her story about her abortion. And I'll call her Alana. Alana had never heard anyone share that they'd had one. So she was like zoomed in to this woman. And then suddenly it panned over and there was a nun, you know, to her, but a religious sister in habit supporting this woman and sitting next to her. And she was like, I've never heard anybody talking about it in worship, but I know that you don't talk about it in front of nuns. That's for sure. And our sisters had been asked to do like one of these little like TV spots for like a local station, you know, that airs at like prime times, such as 3 a.m. So like you don't know where it's going or who's gonna see it. But at the bottom it said Hope and Healing After Abortion and a phone number. So she took it down, and Alana gets to work the next day. She goes under her desk, and she's like, calls the number. She goes, hello? And sister's like, hello? She's like, I need hope and healing. And she's like, wonderful. And she started sharing her story and talking to her and going deeper and deeper. And then she goes, but I'm not Catholic. And she was pretty sure that sister would reject her on that note and just waited, like, throw it out there. Sister's like, that's fine. You can still come on this day of prayer and healing. And a lot of the women that we serve, they think they're going to be the only one there. Because before the abortion, the evil one's like, oh, everyone does this. Oh, go ahead. No, it'll take back yesterday. No, you'll get over it. Okay, just go ahead. Go through with it. And then he turns, and he's like, oh, you're the worst person in the world. No one can ever love you. I mean, I wouldn't even keep this, bury this deep, you know, and just punish yourself for the rest of your life. He's so conniving. So when they get to us through such great courage and sometimes tribulation, just because of all the stumbling blocks put before them, and they come, there's 20 other women there. It is so deeply moving to watch them come together in this shared suffering and to see that Jesus brought all their hearts there and he worked so hard. So on this particular day, Alana, who was not Catholic, but was at a Catholic mass where this offering was made of being able to offer a rose for your child and name your child. She was so deeply moved that she was also very hurt that she couldn't receive Holy Communion. So the day kind of ended on this sour note, and she was so sad. And after so much joy and peace and healing, and so as she was leaving, she was hailing a cab and trying to kind of get away from the sisters because she didn't understand what had just happened. And so the sisters saw this and chased after her. They were like, Alana, wait! And she was like, no! And then like another person got in her cab. So she was like, oh, my God, you know, and like she started talking to the sisters and she shared her heart with them and they were able to say, we're going to walk with you. We want you to know more about the Catholic faith, more about Mass, and like we want Jesus to continue this healing work in your own heart. And that was enough for her, and she knew that she would keep coming back. So she hails a new cab, and the new cab driver is like, earrings down both lobes the entire way around, sleeves of tattoos, and this woman who's driving her, she's like, whoa, like I hope this goes well. Like I just hope this exchange goes well. And the driver looks in the rearview mirror at Alana and she goes, you don't look like the kind of woman who would be hanging out with nuns. And it's like, who does hang out with nuns? Like, what does it mean? Like, what? I don't know if I'm offended or if I'm like, is that a compliment? So she had a choice, right? To put the sisters down and say something like, oh, no, they're the, whatever. Or to be like, you're rude, it's none of your business. She felt the prompting of the Holy Spirit. And she said, they're helping me heal after my abortion. And the driver looks into the rearview mirror again and goes, I've had 4. And a whole conversation opened up about mercy and Jesus and healing and the fact that that event does not have the last word. There's new life and it's available to you. And she eventually entered the church, and she went back to her home parish in Harlem and gave her testimony at every Mass to standing ovations over and over again. But she's an evangelist. She's Mary Magdalene. She's an apostle to the apostles. But this is the reality that Jesus didn't want her in that first cab. He saw the driver in the other cab. And Jesus is a good shepherd, and he knows where his lambs are, and he knows which ones are stuck in the brambles and feel scared in the rain by themselves, and he goes after them, and he brings them home. This is what I love about Charles de Foucauld and his story. Charles de Foucauld came from an aristocratic family in France, and he was orphaned at the age of 6, and was adopted by his very devout and loving grandfather. But even with this, because of the sufferings of his life, because of confusion, he lost his faith as he grew into young adulthood. He entered the military, and it was at that time that his grandfather passed away and left him a huge inheritance. And Charles began living a very wild life. He spent all that money on food, gambling, drink. He was living with a mistress. He became a scandal to his family, and he received a dishonorable discharge from the military. And when he returned home, the one who received him back was his cousin Marie. And it was like the light of her faith, like lit up Charles's darkness. And she knew he was a prodigal and loved him. He would sit in the back of Catholic churches and pray what he would later call the strange prayer, which was, my God, if you exist, reveal yourself to me. He eventually received the grace to go to confession, and in that moment he said, I became a child again. He decided to dedicate himself totally to God. He eventually was ordained a priest and lived among Muslims and Jews in Africa. And he knew that he was bringing Jesus there into the desert because he was there. And he became known as the Holy Man and the Universal Brother. And when he died, he had written a rule for a religious community, and no one ever joined him his whole life. I think he had one guy join him for like a couple months and left. Like he was martyred. He was martyred and died seemingly a failure. And now I think there's 3 religious communities that follow his rule that have sprung up. The Little Brothers and Little Sisters of Jesus follow the rule of Charles de Foucauld. So the fruitfulness of a yes, even if it's hidden from us. When we think about sin, when we think about repentance, when we think about mercy, we really want to look at those who have been on the journey. And we want to receive courage and hope from their struggle and from their victory in Jesus. And just considering this culture and thinking about all the struggles that are out there, everything that's bombarding us, I want to name a resource for you that might be helpful. But have you all heard of Audrey Assad? Yes. She's an incredible singer and songwriter, and she's really a beautiful soul. But if you haven't heard her testimony, it's really worthy of your time. She shared at a Seek conference a few years ago her journey, and listening to her is like being anointed in the Holy Spirit. Like literally, she prays over you. But she stumbled upon pornography as a teenager by accident, didn't know what it was, and kept going back to it and became addicted pretty quickly. And it led her to habitual masturbation, and the shame was all-encompassing for her, really, really wounding, and broke her down in a lot of ways. And she suffered it in silence and not knowing where to turn or who to talk to. And she shares her testimonies with such delicacy and honesty about how Jesus met her in the depths. And he drew her out of that place of shame and darkness by bringing her friends whom she could share with and hold accountable through prayer, through being able to confess it, and just how Jesus brought her to such an incredible place of healing and freedom. And I know Matt Frad gives a really great testimony to men for that struggle as well. But being able to recognize that confession frees us from death-dealing shame. Rule 13 of the Discernment of Spirits, written by St. Ignatius, says that the evil one acts like a seducer in our lives. So whenever I hear this whisper in my heart when it comes to sin about like, oh, don't tell anyone about that. I'm like, oh, it wasn't that big a deal. I'll let it go. You're always going to do that. That's just part of who you are. You know, anything in that realm is the evil one trying to keep you in the dark and keep you under lock and key in bondage. And it's like, as soon as I hear that, I should be like, no, the light. Go to confession again and again and again, and have hope and courage in that. Jesus is the healer. Nothing is beyond his power to heal. And he touches us and he allows us, even in the suffering of that, even in the wound of it, the pain of it, the regret of it, and he allows it to radiate and we become even more compassionate towards others. So these three secrets: God dwells within us. He gives us the capacity to love in the midst of great suffering, tragedy, difficulties, and he makes us new. And we know this. A lot of times we can see this in the lives of the women that we serve. And one of my favorite stories is the story of Patti. And I was living with Patti, and she came to us, having shared with her boyfriend that she was pregnant. He basically gave her an ultimatum, and he said, well, you pick me or the baby. And if you pick the baby, you can move out. And she was totally crushed, utterly betrayed. And she chose the baby, and she found the Sisters of Life. Now, Patti was raised in Thailand, so she was a practicing Buddhist. And she moved into our convent, and often in the mornings, Patti was first in the chapel. So Patti would sit in holy hours, and she would just let Jesus radiate over her, just like you do here in adoration, and let his presence. So I love to think about adoration as like, I'm from Florida originally, so being in the sun, you know when it's like overcast, and so you don't put sunscreen on, so like, oh, it's so overcast today. You know, and then that night you get home and you're like, whoa, I am scorched. I am like tomato scorched. I think about adoration like that because I'm in the presence of Almighty God, and he's radiating over me, and sometimes I'm just very tempted to be like, well, this holy hour stinks, you know? Wow, what a waste of my time and yours. Seriously, I should just leave because my prayer is like not on. Hers is just like journaling up a storm. Don't ever judge your prayer while you're in it. Seriously, you don't know if you're getting scorched. Just stay there. Stay to what you committed to. Desert or oasis, stay there. You're in front of Jesus. He's loving on you. Anyway, that's an aside. So while Patti would sit in front of the Blessed Sacrament, she was being healed of deep places of bruised identity, bruised memories, real hurts, and her sexuality, her goodness, the goodness of men, God's plan for her. Everything was being healed. Now her baby came 2 months early, premature, and scared us all. And fear for his life, Patti asked at the hospital that he be baptized a Catholic. And he was put into the neonatal intensive care unit, into the little incubator, and he was a little fighter, Patrick Joseph. And he lived, and it became a real image for us sisters of Holy Communion, because Patti was only allowed to hold Patrick Joseph for 10 minutes a day, because whenever she held him, his heart beat so fast that he lost weight. So they limited it. They said you can only hold him for 10 minutes a day. So literally, she'd spend the whole morning preparing to receive Patrick Joseph into her hands for 10 minutes. And then after holding him for that time. She'd spend the rest of the day in Thanksgiving, and she got to hold him another day. And it was like this whole cycle of Holy Communion with Patrick Joseph. But Patti knew that if this is what she wanted for her son in his death, this is what she wanted for both of them as they would live. So she entered our CAA class, and the women in the house took note of Patti's beauty and goodness and joy. And one of them, Gulnara, she had been raised in Russia without any faith at all, but she loved Patti. And she wanted to spend all of her time with Patti. So I remember one night, she was like, sisters, I'm going to go to class with Patti tonight. I just want to hang out with Patti. And we were like, okay, bye. It was so much fun at RCIA together. Okay. Wow, Jesus, you know, so amazing. She fell in love with the classes. She herself was baptized and had her son Daniel baptized and came to the church through Patti's example. So as Patti was moving forward in our CAA classes, she realized that it wasn't prudent for her to go back to school, and she was here on a student visa, but with a preemie, it wouldn't be prudent. And so she decided to return home to Thailand, and she told Father, like, I won't be able to complete our CAA and see you through Easter. My visa's up. And he said, oh, Patti, you are ready for baptism and Holy Communion. We are going to have that, and we're going to do it tomorrow at Mass. We were like, perfect. Okay. So I was with her the night we were finding her the baptismal garment, and so paint the picture. Manhattan, Thanksgiving Day weekend, Macy's, 9 p.m. No, we haven't found it yet, and stores are closing in a couple hours, and so we run in, and Patti and Sister Rita ran one way, and I ran the other with Patrick Joseph towards the dress racks. And I was a novice at the time, so I still had a little bit of the world left in me. And I was like, 66% off! With the dress rack. And I don't know, but I look like a sister in full habit, dress shopping, with a baby. The gentleman who worked there approached me timidly, and he's like, sister, is there anything I can help you with? And I was like, yeah, you can pray that we find the perfect baptismal garment for that young woman over there. And he's like, okay. He's like, something like this, and it was like, oh. It was like beautiful pearls down all the edges, and it fit her like it was made for her. And he went and picked out shoes that were in the back that weren't even on sale, and all these accessories. And when he rang her up, let's just say it was a generous discount. I mean, that did not add up at all. When we got home, Patti was asking if we had a chapel veil for her to wear, and she's like, sister, my heart is going like this. I feel like tomorrow is my wedding day. And it was, in so many ways. It is your wedding day, Patti. Jesus is going to wed himself to you. God is going to dwell in your soul and bind himself to you. Jesus is going to look at you and say, this is my body given up for you, Patti. It is your wedding day tomorrow. And this is what Jesus can do and does do and wants to do more of in all of our lives. So let us live this love. Let us live this union, this transforming communion that he offers to us. So I just really want to encourage all of you as we go forth tonight. Yeah, we're in the middle of Lent. It's perfect time. Perfect time to say, yeah, am I spending 20 minutes a day in prayer? 20 minutes a day. Great baseline. Great start. 20 minutes protected, uninterrupted, undistracted. It's amazing how we're like, I'm going to pray at 2 o'clock today. I am. And then someone's like, hey, what are you doing around 2? You're like, nothing. I'll pray later. And it's like, right as you're going to bed, you're like, I love you, Jesus. No. It's just a real relationship with a real person. So he's like, what in the world? If I were on a date at 2, I wouldn't be like, no, I'm not doing anything. I'd be like, oh, I have plans. Sorry. Can 4 work? 6? I'm actually meeting a real person who's expecting me because they love me, so I can't. How do we treat Jesus? Come on. It's a real person with real feelings, you know? A real beating heart. 20 minutes a day. And if you need help wondering where that could get carved in, maybe some of your friends can show you how you spend 20 minutes that needs to go. I have a few suggestions. We can talk afterwards. There's time that we waste, and we know it. And Jesus needs that time with us. And sometimes we have to be silent, and then we think, all these distractions come in, and it's kind of like that Chuck E. Cheese game with the gopher, where you're like, oh, and then we're exhausted at the end of prayer. That's not what we're called to. We're literally called to be in communion and relationship. I open my heart and I share the contents with Jesus. I let him know what I'm thinking, feeling, struggling with. And I read scripture. Scripture's the living word of God. I let him speak to me. If I don't know how to do that, I get a really great resource. Father Timothy Gallagher. A moment of silence in the man's name. Okay. Give me rights on prayer. Literally, podcasts, books, read them. Literally, there's so much available to us. The sacraments. St. Elizabeth of the Trinity said, cross the word discouragement out of your dictionary of love. And I really recommend that to you. Jesus never accuses us. He never forces us, and he never discourages us. So reaching out to him, he wants to give himself to you, and he wants you to receive everything from him, especially in college when you're discerning what you're going to do with your life, your vocation, how your heart was made to love. He wants to reveal that to you. He wants you to know that. It's not a game. He doesn't take it lightly. He's not teasing you. He wants you to know your vocation. There are men in this room who are called to be husbands and fathers. And boy, do we need you now. Good husbands who are faithful and committed. Good fathers who provide, who guard the gates of their homes, who love their children with affirmation, with correction. Fathers who are present, we need you. If that is your vocation, please say yes with all that you are and all that you have. God is calling some of the men in this room to the priesthood. He wants you to stand in his place, bring Jesus down from heaven, be his mercy in the confessional. Everyone will call you Father. God is calling some of you men to that. If that is your vocation, please say yes with all that you are and all that you have. Rebuild the church. Ladies, Jesus is calling some of you to be wives and mothers, and boy, do we need you now. I'm a vocation director, and I'll get on the phone with someone, and I'll hear that they're called to marriage. It'll be really plain to me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, religious life, I don't hear it. I hear a generous heart, but I think you're called to marriage. I'm so excited for you, but I wanted to do something radical for Jesus. And I'm like, get married! Stay married! Have children, or love those entrusted to you as a spiritual mother. Please, that is radical. The most radical thing you can do with your love is what Jesus intended for it. Vocation. So yeah, whoops, getting a lot. Ladies, if God is calling you to be a wife and a mother, please say yes with all that you are and all that you have. And God is calling some of you ladies in this room to be religious sisters. You have to love him with all that you are and have as his bride, and to receive everything from him. And to love every child as if it were your own of flesh and blood. To be available to every person in that way, as mother. And Jesus is inviting you to that. Say yes with all that you are and all that you have. Doesn't mean there aren't going to be fears. Every vocation follows the royal road of the cross. That's where intimacy is. So I recommend, I prayed 3 Hail Marys every night for my future husband when I was starting marriage. I don't know where those went, but. Blessed Mother, I just entrust my future husband to you, just wherever he is and whatever he's doing. And if he's dating anyone right now, she better keep her hands off him. Amen. Incredibly pious prayer. So I just wanted to recommend that to you. It is effective, I hope. It didn't totally turn out the way I intended, but probably saved. Anyway, so what I'm saying is, Jesus loves you and knows you and wants you to experience and receive his love more deeply. So I thought we could close with a song. Maybe my sisters can help me to sing it so I don't sing up here by myself. And entrust our vocations and our hearts to the Blessed Mother. So just want to close your eyes and entrust your hearts, your needs, your intentions to Our Lady, especially Our Lady at Cana, who noticed a need and an emptiness and a longing and a want that no one else noticed, and she brought it to Jesus, and it got filled to overflowing new wine. So we'll trust everything to her. Our Lady, our Mother, protect us with your prayer. Guard us, defend us, O Queen of Peace. Our Lady, our Mother, protect us with your prayer. Guard us, defend us, O Queen of Peace. Our Lady, our Mother, protect us with your prayer. Guard us, defend us, O Queen of Peace. Amen. Great. We're excited to be here for the next couple days, and we have holy cards for everyone. So don't be shy. We have plenty of ladies of trust and things like that. So if you'd like to grab those, thank you. Sorry for forgetting.
Thank you, sisters, so much. Thank you for sharing the secrets of the saints with us and making them human and helping us to understand their humanity and the way that they radically lived out the love that they were called to. Thank you all for coming. It's so great to see all of your faces. For all of the women in the audience, just wanted to invite you, again, Sister may have mentioned it briefly, but there's, on Saturday morning, there's going to be a women's, morning of reflection. It's not discernment specific, you don't have to be considering religious life or anything to come. Just feel free to come, be encouraged in your feminine genius, and just the way that you're created to love God. That will start with Mass at 8 a.m., and then 8:30 to 9:30 will be a time of reflection. There'll be coffee and potentially pastries. Bring some to share, like a couple scones, muffins, something. And then you can, eat whatever someone else brought. Yeah. Just want to thank Sister again for coming. Maybe one more round of applause.